Welcome to GB 2.0. This is Season 4, Episode 1 on February 3rd, 2018. And I'm your host, Clare Wuellner. Joining me today is Jen Peeples.
Hey, everybody.
And Tracie Harris.
Howdy.
Who are both regular hosts on the Atheist Experience. GB 2.0 is a production of the Atheist Community of Austin, a nonprofit educational organization dedicated to the separation of government and religion and the promotion of positive atheist culture. Announcements. I have one, and that is that next Saturday from noon to 5 will be the Darwin Day event, which is put on by CFI. The ACA helps sponsor it. There will be everything from lectures about the evolution of the eyes to a fossil dig and life under a microscope. There will be things for all ages. It is free, and it is awesome. I've been involved in at some level every year for many, many years, and I highly recommend that you come. And there's birthday cake. You can't hardly knock that. You should come just for cake, if nothing else. All righty. So what's going on?
Oh, not too much. I guess there's a memo that's out.
A couple of them, I guess.
Yeah, my security as a citizen is at risk now or something?
Yeah, I guess so.
I don't know. I feel the same as I did yesterday.
Yeah, I know it's hard to tell. That memo was in the Army what we call a safe dud.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
I like that. That's very, very apropos.
Yeah.
Right on. Well, our topic for today, to start things off, is going to be the name. It comes about because of the name of the show. When we wanted to reboot this, I wanted to talk about the name of it, Godless Bitches. I know that it's been that and that people are happy with it. But I know that bitch is a word that's pretty loaded. And we had lots and lots of talks about it. And we finally settled back on, of course, Godless Bitches. And I agree with that, and that's fine. But it was such a great topic, and we had such good conversations about it. I wanted to have that be what we talk about today. So the word bitch.
Yeah. So our use of the word, it's deliberately provocative. Mm-hmm. And part of the reason we wanted to be that provocative is because bitch is a term that's often used to put a woman in her place. Mm-hmm. You know, if she's assertive and confident and she's basically threatening to the status quo, it's kind of a tradition just to label her a bitch. Mm-hmm. It's a way of dismissing her. And so our use of that term is a reclamation of the term. It is us embracing that. It's like, yes, we're bitches. Bitches have agency. Mm-hmm. A bitch can piss you off, you know. And, you know, the shrinking wallflower who goes in the corner and sits and doesn't make any waves, she's not a bitch. She's not going to piss you off. Mm-hmm. She's also not going to do anything. Mm-hmm. So this is the Department of Getting Shit Done.
Oh, people are looking at me. So
Yeah, Tracie.
I guess I'm up. I guess the only thing that I would like to insert here, it's like I was pretty passive about whatever the show was named or not named. I understood why Beth named it, what she did. I had no objection to it. If somebody had wanted to change the name, I would have no objection to that.
Yeah, shout out to Beth Presswood.
Yeah. This was, she was very good.
This goes out to you, dedicated to Beth Presswood. Yay!
Well, I mean, she allowed ACA to take the show, and
right
I think
on.
that was a good thing. So I appreciate her allowing us to do that. And I would like to just talk for a moment about the difference between aggressive and assertive, and passive aggressive and passive.
Yeah.
So, as an example, someone brought donuts. Right, so we came in, and one of the crew was kind enough to bring donuts, and so they were there. And an aggressive person walks in and grabs a donut and just starts eating it. Doesn't ask, are these for something, for someone? Doesn't really give consideration to anybody else. Just goes in and pursues what they want without consideration for others. An assertive person walks in, sees the donuts, thinks, I would like to have a donut, and they say, hey, are these for anybody, or can anyone have one? Because I would like a donut. So they're willing to assert what they want, but they're also considerate of whether this is going to cause a problem for someone else. passive aggressive person would walk in and see the donuts and say, "Huh, well, that's nice that you brought donuts. I wish I had one. Be nice if I could have a donut." So you're supposed to say, "Oh, would you like a donut?"
Yeah.
Right? They can't really assert themselves. They haven't been raised in a way where they feel safe just simply asking for things they want.
Right.
So these are people who find this sort of passive way, and they're a little bit angry usually when it comes up because they're mad that they can't just say what they want, and you're supposed to just guess so that they don't have to be assertive because they have a lot of trouble being assertive. A passive person just doesn't ever have a donut.
Yeah.
they just think, oh, those donuts look good, but I don't think I should. I probably shouldn't eat one. They're probably for something else, and they just simply don't even ask. So, and I think it's important that I think what Jen is saying is that with women, the term bitch is thrown at them as though they're being aggressive, but generally it just means that they're being assertive. Now, I have heard, to be fair, some women who self-label as a bitch that are aggressive women, and they, to me, are kind of, I always feel like an embarrassment at the affiliation when I see somebody being really vile, like what I would call an asshole to people, and then saying, yeah, I'm a bitch and I'm proud of it. And it's like, no, you're just an asshole.
Yeah.
And there's nothing to be proud of about the way you're treating other people. So that would just be my input.
Yeah.
Words are complicated, and for me, the word bitch really comes from the female dog. And I own a female dog who was a bitch, and a real, actual canine bitch is an amazing animal. Their behavior is perfect. They are 100% appropriate all the time. They know boundaries very well. They assert what they want. And if you don't listen the first time, there are no second chances. She will snap and let you know exactly what she wants. And it's always in line, and everybody snaps to attention. She's a rat terrier, and she's had, I guess, a few litters. She can get into the midst of six big dogs, like lab-sized dogs, who are playing, and jump in the middle and go, "Rawr, rawr," and they all just pull up straight and say, "I'm so sorry, what did I do?" And she's got that power. That, to me, is what a bitch is.
Right.
And so it has, for me, super positive things. And I know that human beings are different. And if somebody calls me a bitch, it's not going to have much power at all because I don't care. But the fact is, bitch is the way it's used is hostile.
Right.
And my concern was that anybody who listens to the show has self-selected to be okay with bitches already, and we're preaching to the choir. The people I would like to reach go outside of that. People who are feminists who need the information and would be curious about what we're talking about, but say, I won't watch it because of the name. It just really turns me off. So that was my objection. And it's any word can be used in an ugly way or a great way.
Yeah.
Like if somebody says my name, Claire, that can be the most loving thing in the world. If somebody says Claire, just something awful, it's like, oh, Jesus, what's going on?
Yeah.
So the way it's used is everything. And to me, it doesn't much matter. But it's clear to me that it does matter to a lot of people. And that was my objection.
I actually find the context when it's used aimed at men to be more offensive.
Yes.
When somebody aims it at a guy in order to suggest that he is like disempowered and kowtowing to
Right.
somebody and basically
Somebody's
saying,
bitch.
"Oh, you're his bitch," and
That does bother me.
that is
right?
really disempowering. I mean, there's no way to make that into a good thing.
No, you're absolutely
Right.
right. That's absolutely true.
Yeah, and that's that actually is true for a lot of words that we don't even think of as offensive. And there's a way of using words that are traditionally associated with women or some female characteristic. When it's applied to men, it's a deliberate means of putting them down. And
Pejorative.
bitch is one of those.
Yeah, I mean, it's
So-
very interesting that when it's aimed at a woman, it's trying to imply that she's being far too aggressive. And when it's
Right.
aimed at a man, it's trying to imply he's far too passive.
Right.
Same term.
Yeah. Yeah, this is a great segment because it does explain that we are deliberately reclaiming this word.
And I also want to say, though, that this is going to hit on probably something that I'm very interested in, which is the concept of how particular ideas or themes in society can impact different groups in different ways, so that you can have this insult aimed at different people and it means entirely different things, and everybody understands it means an entirely different thing when you use it aimed at this particular human being than this particular human being. So you're using the same label, completely opposite insult,
Right.
depending on the demographic that you aim it at.
Right.
So demographics are often hit in somewhat variant ways by the same things. So you'll have a problem in society or an issue in society, like this insult, but how different groups are impacted by it is different, but both are impacted by it.
Right.
And I think that's going to be a theme that's probably going to come up often on the show.
Right.
Absolutely.
Well,
Absolutely.
one of the things that we talked about earlier in our conversation about this is the way we're using bitch is kind of, I think back to how the word queer kind of evolved as an insult aimed at, the gay community. Years ago, you could call somebody a queer, and that was a pretty serious insult. Now, it's like if you hear someone using queer, trying to use it as a pejorative, most of us in the gay community just laugh because
I
it's
would
like
laugh.
it's right there in the name, LGBTQ.
Yeah.
We just own it.
Right.
You know.
Yeah. Well, it seems to me that in all things equality, women's rights always take up the last. Minorities, different sexual orientations, they seem to be ahead of us in terms of legal things and damn near everything else. It's still acceptable in most of the realms I walk around in to say something inappropriate about women. But if you were to do the same thing about a person of color or somebody whose sexual orientation was not the cishet norm, Jesus, you're an asshole.
I think we share some things in common with the disability community, like community of disabled people.
Mental illness.
Whatever it is.
Right,
But
right.
however you want to label that, slurs toward the disabled and slurs toward women are still extremely acceptable. But slurs toward religion, race, things like that are not. And and the atheist community, I think, sees this as well, right? So we get a lot of horrible things said about us. And if you take those horrible comments and you insert the word Jew instead of atheist, you look at it and you say, nobody would say that. I mean, David Duke maybe, but nobody that doesn't want people to think that they're completely a bigot would say such a thing about any religious group. And so you have these situations where where certain things that are unheard of or that are considered extremely socially taboo when aimed at a particular demographic become less taboo when aimed at this demographic over here. And it's weird because, both demographics are facing bigotry and oppression, and yet this one hasn't reached a level where it's not okay to use slurs.
Right. We couldn't even get the ERA amendment passed. I remember that going on when I was a kid, and here I am, 50, and still nothing.
And to be fair, I think the last year has shown that maybe the slurs were more acceptable than we thought.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I'm privileged enough to roll in groups where you don't hear this stuff. And there are people that come around who seem to think that this is a normal thing. And
This
I'm
is
like,
true. Yeah.
the group I'm in, if you said this, that'd be the last time you're invited to something. Like,
Right.
you don't say that.
But yeah, you kind of see what's happening in a broader, demographic than the ones that we typically travel in, and then you object to something like this, and you get accused of being, you're just being too emotional about this.
Oh, well.
You need to just, calm down. And by the way, telling somebody to calm down in a discussion about their rights, their basic civil rights, that never works. It's very condescending. If you're one of those people who tells people to calm down in the middle of an argument, sit down and shut the fuck up. That's not helpful to anything.
Yeah.
It's important.
Even if a person is really irate, like even if somebody is really
Right.
losing it, telling them to calm down is not going to calm them down.
Right.
So
it's not going to work, and it means you're not
useless thing.
listening.
Yeah.
When somebody talks about something like that and their emotions are playing big, there's a lot of emotional policing that goes on. You're right. I think the best thing to do, and what I try to do, is to listen to the meta message. Instead of being put off by the anger or whatever, step back and listen. What are they saying? What's going on here?
Right.
There's a deeper something I need to pay attention to. If somebody's this upset, something's wrong. And it might be something wrong with them in particular, or it might be something societal, but pay attention.
Yeah. Well, and I heard a lot of this when, the Black Lives Matter movement was first ramping up. There were an awful lot of people saying, oh, they're just being really emotional about this. It's just,
God
they're so angry. And
Well, yeah.
I was like, well, yeah, they're being shot. This is like, we're witnessing extrajudicial executions, being played out here. They're bringing this to a larger audience. They've known about this for a long time. If you were in fear of your children being shot in the street for no reason, wouldn't you be pissed off? I would.
Oh my God. Yes.
I mean,
Oh gosh. When you have something that you can't change about your person, if it's being female or the color of your skin, and the world treats you in a certain way because of that, it's to step into their shoes. You just can't do it. You need to listen.
right.
There's a minister here in town. His name is Sid Hall, and a long time ago, I heard him give a sermon where he said, as a heterosexual male Christian, white, listing all of the things that he was that's normative, I need to shut up, and my job is to listen. And I love quoting him every time somebody on my feed or whatever says something like, oh, women, blah, 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 and it's a man. I'm like, you really need to be listening. You don't really understand. You can't possibly understand. And that whole listening piece.
Anytime I hear a statement that starts with the division, right, my flag always goes up immediately when someone says, hey, women, or hey, gays, or hey, blacks, or when I hear that sort of descriptor, I immediately think, be wary of what's to follow.
Yeah.
Because the person is already dividing people up into a demographic that may not be, like they're dividing up into categories that may not really be the category.
Yeah. That reminds me of something that just happened. So the Grammys just happened. And so I guess it was some record executive, and I forget his name, but he tweeted out that women in the industry need to step up to be producers and, all these, take leadership roles in the industry. And
because they keep rejecting them, I'm sure. Like
Yeah.
they're being offered
Yeah.
like all
Right.
these roles and
Because they'd
rejecting
rather
them.
be at home.
so Pink, who I love Pink, she got on Twitter and just eviscerated this guy. She's like, women have been stepping up since the beginning. And, it's not that we're not stepping up. It's that basically there's this institutional sexism in the industry that's keeping women from being record producers and, executives in the industry. And anyway, it was an epic. If you don't follow Pink on Twitter, you're probably missing out.
Right on.
She's fantastic. But anyway, I was looking up some numbers, and it turns out that I think in the last I forget what the time frame is. I think maybe 10 years or something. 9% of Grammy nominees are women.
Golly.
So
What percent, I wonder how that falls out in terms of what percent of songs out there or albums there are or musicians there are.
There's a lot of female singers.
I know it. I know
Sitting here
it's
thinking
more
to
than
myself,
9%, people. I know it's 9%.
I'm sitting here thinking
but-
like that's an industry where women actually are promoted. I mean, but this brings up an interesting point, and I don't know if that I was like super excited for the new Van Jones show I am like, big on when they have him on panels. I love his commentary. He's usually on CNN, and they finally have given him his own segment. And so I was very excited to see it. His first hour-long segment featured Jay-Z. And so Jay-Z came on, and he's talking about his perspectives and what he's trying to do as far as dealing with empowerment of the Black community. And one of the things he specifically talked about was how, when it comes to music, he's like, you see that there are a lot of Black entertainers, but what you don't see are, a lot of the Black people that are in the industry are not in positions of power. Like you're talking about, they're not the promoters, they're not the owners, they're not owning the contract. They're the ones on the other end of it. They're the product that goes out, does the stuff, makes the money, hands it to someone else. Not that they don't make a lot of money. I mean, yes, they do bring. I'm not trying to imply that they're not paid, but they don't own the product.
Right.
They don't, and they're the ones producing. And so what he was saying, and what he's tried to do with himself and with other entertainers, is to try to get everybody in a position where they can own the product. He's like, unless you own the product, you really are not empowered. When you are the product, you go away, the next product comes, and you're, shuffled away. And so his whole thing was about, it's not about being, getting the paycheck from someone else. It's about being the guy who has the money, that has the power, that's writing the checks. And what was really interesting is that there was a tweet that came out from Trump, like really the next day. I can't remember. I'm trying to remember what happened or what was the event, but there was a tweet, not in response to that show, but in response to, it might have been something like, I don't know if it was the Grammys or what, but something happened the next day. And that might have been why they had Jay-Z on, is because the Grammys were coming on the next day. But I didn't watch the Grammys, but I think it might have been the Grammys. Trump tweeted, and he said, Black unemployment is the highest, is lowest it's ever been. And I was like, wow, this is weird, because I just watched an hour-long segment where there was a person who's working toward empowerment of the Black community saying, this is the problem, that it's not about I need a job, it's about I need to be the entrepreneur. And here you are responding to this with, hey, you're getting a paycheck. And it's like, did you listen?
Yeah, Captain Clueless.
Yeah. Now, I know the Van Jones show wasn't the Grammys, but the point is, when you're going to issue a response on something like that, it seems like you would inform yourself somewhat. I mean,
who?
No, but
What are we talking about?
I'm just saying that
Right.
if you're going to help a particular community, or you're going to say that you're helping, you might want to look at the perspectives that are offered and see if this is really what is being requested, or what you're being told is needed.
Yeah. Of course, that would require a degree of intellectual curiosity that, the Mango Mussolini doesn't
But a lot of
possess.
people do this, though. I mean, look how many people got upset at the NFL players.
Oh, I know. Yeah.
Right? And it's like, there's this, it's a weird cyclical thing, right? So you have this community that is completely disenfranchised. And they are, like you said, the voice is not being heard. They're tucked away in a ghetto somewhere. It's not, and so they're coming out and saying, how frustrating it is to live in this society where my voice is not heard. So they come forward, they do these protests, and then these players who came out of the same situation very often, they use their position and the celebrity that they've gained from their position to bring more, visual to this movement. Basically, they're saying, I'm going to bring more attention to this by using my position, because I'm in a position that is very elite.
Right.
So they do
which
this.
is an incredibly ethical thing to do.
Right. And
when
immediately,
you gain power, you use it to help
immediately,
people.
right, they're attacked for this, and people are like, you're being treated well, you're making lots of money. Why don't you just sit down, shut up? Why are you complaining? You're not that person in the ghetto.
Right.
You've made good. And it's like, that's why they're reaching back here. This is a person who didn't forget where they came from, didn't forget what it was like, knows that there are still people in that position and wants to help. And you're literally when it's a person who's not in that position, you want to just have them not protest. And then when somebody in that position does something, you want to say you have no right to protest because you're not poor.
Yeah.
It's disturbing. It's just It's just a refusal to hear the voice. This isn't even about those issues. These are justifications to simply say, I don't want to hear your voice. Just
Right.
go back to being silent.
Exactly. Yes. We did you a favor. We let you into our club.
Yeah.
You need to shut up and be quiet.
So personally, I feel a little weird about three white girls talking about civil rights for black people, people of color. But I know a whole lot about feminism. And the same things sort of apply here. To get people to listen and to give up the people who are in power, which is, essentially white males, to recognize that they have that. I have a son, and Jen, you have a son as well. And when, I don't know how political we can get. In any case, at this point, I feel like he can't just be a feminist. He needs to be a super feminist because there's so much at stake right now. There's so much. It's always been there. I don't think there's anyone who's suddenly decided that they're going to be horrible people. But being an out and proud feminist and doing what we can right now, and if you're a white male, even giving up the it's hard to describe the notion that you know everything. You don't.
Yeah.
I don't mean to sound antagonistic. I just, from personal experience in talking to men, and the men I talk to, a lot of them are very willing to listen. And the number of times they've said to me, wow, I had no clue, or said something that indicated that they really don't still have a clue. We need to educate. So what do you, yeah.
Yeah, I think my son is, well, first of all, he's got two moms, so he lives in a female-headed household, and he's always been surrounded by strong women. So there's
My husband will tell you that he lives in a female-headed household too.
Yeah.
So.
But he and early on we were kind of more concerned, possibly because other people were concerned about him not having a strong male role model. And at some point we realized, you know what? He doesn't live in a bubble. There are men all out in the world, and he's going to go out into the world and experience things. He'll have coaches and teachers and all kinds of role models out there. And some of them will be positive and some of them will be negative. And it's our job to help him, make the right judgments about those things and how, he fits into the world. But we've never imposed, gender roles on him. When he was a little guy, one of his earliest requests when he was just, a toddler, he wanted a pink baby for Christmas. And we thought he was asking for a sibling. And so after some discussion about that, and my wife saying, no, that's not happening. I'm not doing that again.
Yeah.
We finally determined that what he was asking for was this baby doll that had a pink gown on. And the baby, it came with a little doctor kit. And the baby would get sick. And when it gets sick, the little freckles, like the spots would appear on its face. And then you'd have to take care of the baby to make it better. So that's what when he said he wanted a pink baby, that's what he was asking for. And so we're like, oh, we can get you a doll.
Good thing we didn't get started on Plan A.
Boy, that would have, yeah. So he got his pink baby, and I think the next Christmas he wanted a kitchen set. So all of these things, and people were like, oh, get that boy a truck. And it's like, he doesn't want a truck. He wants this stuff.
It's not like we're stopping him from having a truck.
Yeah, he can have a truck if he wants it,
Get them what they want. If anybody thinks that you make a child uber girly or uber boyish, with the toys and the things that they choose, you haven't had a couple of kids. You might have one kid that falls into that, and you're like, oh yeah, my kid eats all of her broccoli and goes to bed on time and all that stuff. I'm like, super, you haven't had a second one. So those tendencies and proclivities towards liking dolls, trucks, horses, dragons, all that stuff, it's got nothing to do with gender. I'm sure there are tendencies, but yeah, you can't make a kid, oh my gosh, my son's favorite color was pink.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And there were people in the family like, oh, you're going to turn him gay. I'm like, holy Christ.
I mean, if a pink shirt is what it takes to turn somebody gay, I mean, come on. How fragile is your sexuality?
Right. And, oh, man.
Yeah. I mean, I have a friend who she wanted to do the I'm not going to impose these gender toys or anything like that on my kid, and the kid is just trucks and superheroes, and he's just
There's just
the
something about
guns, and she's just like, where did this child come from?
Yeah. And the thing is, my son has gone through all of that. I mean, he had the traditional girl toys, the dolls and the kitchen sets and all this stuff. He's also got tons and tons of Legos. He builds robots. He likes folding paper airplanes and flying them. All this stuff that, none of that stuff should have a gender attached to it.
And a lot of it even doesn't. You know what I mean? There's plenty of toys where, show that you can have toys that appeal to anybody. That's not.
Yeah. And so, I this whole bizarre, you've got to, you came out of the womb with these pink bits, therefore this is your life, and it's scripted. It's just absurd,
That segues into a piece that I have, actually.
Okay.
Oh, let's hear it.
So I sometimes watch this entrepreneurial show that's on MSNBC in the mornings on Sunday, super early, and they feature interesting things. It's just people that started with almost nothing, and then they built like big industries from it. Not necessarily humongous. Some of them are pretty big, but some of them are just sort of moderately big. And so they tell their stories about what I did wrong, what I didn't do wrong. So I'm watching this show, and there's this guy who did this company called Wayfarer, not the home stuff thing, but this is some kind of an entertainment company. I wasn't real familiar with it, but apparently it's a big deal. And so he built this thing. And he was talking about how the hardest thing he had to do was sort of take his hands off it, let other people take control of it. He goes, I had to realize that there were better people to make decisions for me, and that was the hardest part, was separating myself from control of the company. And in the meantime, he and his wife had a child. And he said that kind of changed my perspectives on things, and it started making me think about, what does that mean? What does that mean to be a dad? What does that mean to be a man? What does that mean to, what do these labels mean? And so as he started up another thing that he got interested in, and he started this podcast dialogue for him and other men to sit and talk about, what does it mean to be a man? And what are your perceptions on manhood? Where do you feel like it's imposing on you? Do you feel like you live up to these expectations? Are they fair expectations? Where do you think they come from? And I thought, I have to listen to an episode of this. So I checked out an episode, and I picked episode 3, body image issues. I thought that sounded like an interesting one. Now, they address some of the concerns that I would immediately have, which is, first of all, every guy around the table is gorgeous. So all these are good-looking, well-built. Some of them are athletes. Some of them are models, actors. I mean, these are good-looking men. And so immediately a person would think, okay, so you have a group of fantastic-looking men talking about body image issues, because I'm sure you have a lot of problems with your body image issues, But what their point is that people consider us these really good-looking men, and we're insecure about our bodies, and they think we're not. And they addressed the fact that there are definitely people in society that deal with worse issues with body image, that deal with a lot of prejudice, that their issues are not about people thinking they don't suit the mold, it's that they do suit the mold. So they said there's, for me as a model, I feel like I'm ridiculously concerned about whether I can eat that piece of pizza or I can't eat that piece of pizza, because I've got to have my shirt off at the end of the week, and I'm doing this, so I got to be careful what I eat. Right. And some of the guys that were athletic, one of them was a boxer, and he was talking about, or another guy was saying how he would work out a lot when he was younger. He goes, I just would keep bodybuilding, and people were telling me that's too much. And he's just like, I just felt like I couldn't get big enough. He goes, I look at pictures of myself now, I look back, and I think, what was I thinking? My head looks so tiny. I was so huge. He goes, it's just, I don't know why I thought that was necessary.
Yeah.
And so they're kind of going on about these and they did address the idea that men have more leeway. For example, you can go to the pool and you can have the dad bod, and a lot of women are still attracted to that. There's not really an equivalent female dad bod that you can just go and consider it.
Oh, yes, there is.
Okay.
And I have it.
Well, no, what they were saying is it's not, a lot of women find the dad bod sexier
Right.
than what's cut. And they talked about that a little bit too, the idea that, so they talked in a sort of a round table casual fashion, but then they would break away and he would do interviews. So he did an interview with a plastic surgeon talking about body image issues and plastic surgery and, what he knows about it. And then he talked about psychology with body dysmorphia and things like that. So it was super informative. What I found really interesting is the guy who's doing this, I'm looking at him, he looks like a really good-looking guy. I don't know where he's from. He's ethnic looking, and I would probably, if I had to wager, I would say some kind of Mideastern, but he's a good-looking dude. And so he's talking to the plastic surgeon, and he starts asking about, the surgeon says something to him, and he's just like, okay, so if I was going to work on you, like, what would you say about yourself? Like, what would you fix? Would you fix something? Do you feel like you need to fix something? And he's just like, oh, I would fix my nose. And immediately I thought, your nose goes with your face because you have this ethnic-looking face. And I say that as a person with an ethnic face who has an ethnic nose. I mean, there's nothing tiny and button-like about my nose. So I just look at it, though, as, I understand why my nose looks like this because this is an Italian nose, and everybody in my family has this nose. It's not.
Yeah.
So I'm looking at the guy and I'm thinking, really? Like, you're still freaked out about your nose? And so he calls his wife on a cell phone and shows her the Photoshop image that the doctor did. So the doctor does like the mock-up where the way you would show somebody, here's what you are going to look like, here's what I would expect the result to be. And he's like, I want you to look at this picture of me. He's like, what do you think? And she goes, I think you did something to your nose. And he's like, yeah, I'm at the plastic surgeons, and he's showing me this. He goes, this is what he could do for me. And she's like, don't change your nose.
Right.
What?
Yeah.
I used to do a thing when there's every now and then they'll put a show on about plastic surgery. There'll be some series of people getting plastic surgery or whatever. And what I used to do for fun was whenever they would show the client, I would try to guess what they're going to have fixed.
Oh.
So like, okay, what is this person having fixed? And a lot of times I would see the person and I would think, man, this is a tough one. Like, I don't know what not because there's so much to fix, but because everything looks fine.
Yeah.
And so I would make a guess and be like, okay, they're going to get underneath their eyes done or something. And they would be like, oh, I really hate my jaw. And I'm thinking, okay, I don't know, I don't get it.
See it. Yeah.
Right. So it's really interesting how people judge their own bodies. Yeah. And what they were saying is that a lot of people that look really good tend to have a lot of plastic surgery. They just can't quit. And the plastic surgeon said the way that a lot of people realize they have some sort of a mental image issue as opposed to a real physical issue is when the plastic surgeons start telling them, no, I'm not going to do this to you. I'm not going to have this next surgery. You've done enough. And that's the only point they...
Have you ever watched the show Botched?
Oh, gosh, it sounds like a nightmare, so no.
So it's these two plastic surgeons, and they basically fix
other
what
people?
other
Wow.
plastic surgeons have messed up.
Okay.
And there's a lot of people that come in there. There was one guy they had that he designs his own implants,
What?
like pec implants and butt implants and shoulder implant, everything.
Wow.
And he came in.
The
with
client designs his own?
The client.
Wow, okay.
The guy, yeah. And he came in with these implants and he wanted them to put the implants, and they told him no. And this guy really has kind of a bizarre obsession with, he's actually rather slender, and he doesn't work out in a gym at all. He basically does his whole body with these implants and stuff. And
that is so scary.
Done
oh
already?
yes, he'd already had a ton of them.
That is so
done.
scary.
And they told him, no, we don't think we're going to do this.
Good gravy.
I guess to kind of wrap this, I've gone on a little bit long about it, but just to sort of wrap it, the reason I thought it was a good segue to what you were talking about is that it basically is a program that is encouraged to have men open up about their real thoughts and vulnerable thoughts about who am I, what kind of social pressures do I feel, how does this impact me, how does this impact other people. So many times when somebody's talking about an issue, like if we were talking about body image, everybody would expect like, oh, you're going to talk about women that are overweight, you're going to talk about people that are going to be most harshly judged from a social context. But that leaves a lot of the conversation out of the conversation, right? I mean, there's so much else to talk about. And not that this, of course, the people that are most hardest hit by it should be the ones where most of the resource goes, most of the conversation goes, most of the support would go. But I think it's a good thing to realize sometimes that these issues that hurt this group badly have ripple effects that hurt others as well, that this is hurting everybody and it's not good for anyone, and it's especially hurting some people. And when you're talking about your son, I would think that these sorts of conversations, as opposed to some of the more aggressive conversations, right? So you'll talk about, if somebody was talking about body image and we were talking about, for example, how does society view women who don't fit into this perfect image, and how does that impact them? There's always someone that wants to stand up and kind of really aggressively say, what about men? How does what about us? We have these. And this was such an assertive way to do it, as opposed to an aggressive way to do it. This was somebody saying, body image issues can affect all of us.
Right.
Even the people who think that it's not okay to say it affects them. Even the people who look perfect and who are men and who it's not. And one of the guys even said, it's not cool for a man to even talk about this, to say that I'm embarrassed to take my shirt off, or he's like, this is not considered manly. And that's what the show is about, is what is masculinity? And it's called Man Enough, right? So the podcast is called Man Enough. And what he's basically asserting is we are man enough. Now, what I liked also about the show is that in addition to having like a mix of race and a mix of, that was attractive guys, but I think that was kind of his point. But the other thing that was interesting was that they did also include trans men.
Oh, yeah.
And they include gay men. And they had a guy talking about issues of homosexuality and how you're viewed as a homosexual male. And he was like, I think that he expressed that he thought that there was a lot of pressure in the gay male culture to look perfect and to be these perfect men because you're so demasculinized by society when you come out as gay. He also admitted in the podcast that he was HIV positive. He did like a layout and a spread as a model or whatever. He's famous, but he was kind of a good-looking guy. And he was saying that it was very bold to come out and do the spread as an HIV positive gay man, and basically saying that, you can be sexy, you can be HIV positive, you can be gay. And so they were talking about, images of masculinity as it affected things like that. I mean, it was a pretty bold show. I really enjoyed it. I would say that if I was going to recommend a show to a guy in my life that might benefit, this was a pretty good open dialogue about an issue that they were willing to admit affects them, that they don't think affects, they don't think it's cool to talk about it affecting them.
Let's see. Shall we move on to the next thing?
Sure.
And Jen, you said you had something from viewer mail you wanted to talk about?
Oh, yeah. So we get a lot of email. This actually came in through the Atheist Experience email. But I'm always struck by the number of people who they claim to understand the bodily rights argument, and then they go on to create some scenario in which it would be, in their mind, acceptable to violate someone's bodily rights, or they say something that indicates they don't understand it at all. And so we get this email, and I'll just go ahead and read it here. It says, "Hi, everyone. Love the show. I've been watching your arguments on the abortion issue where some of you make the case for bodily autonomy. Was hoping to get your feedback on this comparison. Let's say you bring your 2-year-old on a hike, and by mistake you get lost and appear to be trapped in the woods at nightfall. Are you now under obligation to allow your 2-year-old to use your body to survive for warmth, emotional security, etc.? If you are capable of preserving the child's life and your own, and you choose not to do so by leaving the child alone in the cold, for example, it seems it would be considered childhood neglect or worse. Is this not similar to being under obligation to allow an unborn child to use your body for survival? Thanks, and I look forward to your thoughts."
Yeah, well, this isn't a question of bodily autonomy, right? This is a question of parental obligation.
Exactly.
So this is a person, I'm assuming, because the child is 2 years old and they are in custody of it, that they have agreed to the legal obligations of maternity, paternity, right? I mean, this is a parent, not just a pregnant woman.
Right. So
Exactly.
Yeah.
Not only that, but the child isn't actually dependent on the parent's body for warmth, or for survival.
So in order, but
so sharing warmth
Yeah.
with somebody is not the same as connecting
right,
your
but I think
bloodstream.
if I did know my child had hypothermia and I didn't take care of it, I mean, I am tasked with taking care of it.
Exactly.
So the issue would be more like, what if I was out in the woods with a minor and we ended up, going to sleep
Right.
or something? If the child died from hypothermia, people might think I'm a horrible person for allowing that to happen, but I'm under no legal obligation to save that
Right.
child's life.
Right.
And it's not because of a genetic connection, it's because of a parental obligation. Because I could be genetically the kid's parent, but maybe he's adopted now by someone else, and so I don't have any parental obligations toward that child. So, when you say I'm going to be the caregiver, I'm going to accept those obligations.
Right.
You need to carry that out, just like you would for somebody in your care that was in a wheelchair or something, and you need to take care of that person.
And I mean, it's the same obligation. Let's say there's not a parental or genetic connection to this child, but you have care and control of this child because maybe you are
The Girl Scout camp leader.
the Girl Scout camp leader or
Right.
the babysitter or something. You get lost in the woods. You now have an obligation to care for the child,
Right.
Because you have care and control of the child.
Well, you were in the military, and,
Right.
and there's a similar thing there. There's certain people that you are responsible for, and certain
Exactly.
people you are not responsible for in the same way.
Yeah, exactly. So it's not about do I have to give up my bodily autonomy to fulfill my obligations to this person? It's I've accepted the responsibility for this person, and therefore I have certain obligations.
Right.
And in the case of a child, that may mean that you cuddle them close to you at night to keep them from dying from hypothermia.
Right.
And oh, by the way, you benefit from that too.
I was going to say, yeah. Children are very warm.
Yes.
Wouldn't be entirely selfish.
But I mean, that's completely different than, I mean, if at the end of this you get rescued, are you under a legal obligation to donate a pint of blood to save your child's life?
Right. If they're injured in the incident.
Right. And the answer is no.
No.
You are under no legal obligation to provide even a pint of blood to save your child's life.
And that's a good delineator, because what it basically shows is that even a parental obligation to take care of this child and to ensure their well-being doesn't extend to violating your body in
Right.
a blood tissue type of way.
Right.
Yeah.
This was originally an abortion question, although it really wasn't quite one because they were conflating two different things. But that segues into a segment that I'm, for now, thinking about calling Have You Heard the Good News?, which is talking about successes in the world of feminism. One of the things that I think we wanted to do when we started this show up was to talk about how things are moving forward, what we need to do to help things move forward as well.
Right.
And there was some extremely good news on Monday, and does anybody see where my glasses went? And that was, can I borrow somebody's, I don't know what the heck happened to my glasses. Thank you. I am really bad with that. But Utah recently passed, where did that go? Shoot. The Senate, I guess I didn't get that in here.
So, yeah, there was a 20-week abortion
20-week
ban
abortion
that was
ban.
proposed that failed
Right.
this
and
week. So,
what
yeah.
did that, and the name of the ban was really ridiculous. It was like the fetal pain something or other. And
Right. This whole pain fetish that the anti-abortionists have, that somehow a 20-week fetus can feel pain.
And it can't.
Right.
So the good news is the House did not pass it, and that's an amazing thing. And I wanted to talk a little bit about how incorrect that notion is, that they feel pain at 20 weeks. They do not. And the American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists said it considers the case to be closed, basically, about whether they feel pain or not. And it's pretty clear that the approximate earliest they could possibly feel pain is 27 weeks. And that's based on science, not emotion, and looking at it and thinking that it's a baby and so forth.
And to be clear, there's no clear evidence that they actually do feel pain at 27 weeks even, just that that's the earliest they could possibly feel pain, because prior to that, the neurological structures necessary to transmit pain is not even in place.
Right. And it says that not until 30 weeks that there is evidence of brain activity that suggests that the fetus is awake. So it may be as late as 30 weeks. And then in this particular article, it was published, I think, in, it was a science article, I can't remember, in the Science magazine. But the last sentence in the article was something that's pretty key. She says, yet another issue is that pain is a part of many medical procedures, and so fundamentally the law begs another important question. And this is controversial, I want to talk about this. Why does the potential existence of pain mean that a procedure should be avoided?
Well, it doesn't. I mean, in essence, that whole argument is, in my view, not necessarily in the view of Roe versus Wade, but in my view, it has no bearing.
Right.
It's it's like a pointless argument. Whether or not something feels pain is irrelevant. If my child, like what Jen was talking about earlier, if my child is dying in pain and I can stop its pain by donating a pint of blood, the law doesn't obligate me to donate a pint of blood. So my child can die in pain, I can deny it blood, and I'm totally legally within my rights.
Right. And and that's the thing. It's like if someone wants to say, okay, that makes you a horrible person, okay, great, but that's a separate conversation.
It is. It is.
Versus a legal
and to me,
obligation.
the issue, though, is why would we as a society single out this group and say, you're horrible people for wanting to have the same right that the rest of us have to refuse this procedure?
Right.
That, to me, the idea that people are saying every other person who has adopted the legal obligation, the parental legal obligation, can refuse this sort of bodily violation except you, because you're so selfish that you think your bodily autonomy outweighs somebody else's life, only because every other parent's bodily autonomy outweighs somebody's life, and you're not even a parent. So that's what's interesting to me, is the way that the society is looking at these two rights and then saying basically that everybody should have this right to allow their child to die as opposed to be bodily violated. But when a pregnant woman who is not even legally obligated by any sort of parental obligations or rights says that she would like to express her bodily autonomy as opposed to over and above her child's life, we are like, oh, no, that's got to be illegal.
Right. And that's kind of key, because prior to a child's birth, no one has any parental rights or obligations.
It's really key.
I mean, that is, the child has to actually be born before you, have any parental rights or obligations to either, accept the obligations or say, no, I don't want that.
Yeah, and that's part of. I mean, we don't have time to get into it. Maybe one day we can, but that's kind of my question, is that we have social confusion about what endows a person with parental obligation or with paternity or maternity rights, because it's not until it's born that anybody has them.
Right.
And so the question becomes, did you have them because of genes or did you have them because of investment? The woman births it and she's the mother and she's just invested, risking her life to bring this thing into the world. And so we say, okay, you're the mother. But is she the mother because it's genetically hers, or is she the mother because of what she just did? And it's the same what you're talking about, when it comes to legally in this society, the man has no paternal obligations to the child or to the unborn until it's born and is a child.
Right.
And then he gets rights over, or obligations. He can go to court, do what he needs to do. But the law will understand that because of the genetic input, he has this a legal standing to at least come forward and try to claim rights. So I think our society is like super confused about what constitutes, you'll see lawsuits all the time with adoptive parents and biological, and it's such, what constitutes paternity? What constitutes maternity? Is it really genetics or is it investment? And how do you make that call? It's a weird thing. I think we have a lot of confusion around that. But that's a whole other
That
can
is
of worms.
a big can of worms.
Yeah. Yeah, we should have that conversation in a subsequent show.
Except there's no answers.
Yeah.
It's just a question.
Yeah. Case by case, for sure. And that's why we leave it to the legal system, because they have the resources and the know-how to
But
sort those
you
things
had
out.
that. Did you find your article?
Which one?
The one about the abortion vote?
I didn't.
Okay.
I don't know if
I think it
lost-
was 51 to 46, if I
Yes,
remember
you found it.
right.
That's it.
well, I didn't find it, but I.
Oh, that's- that-
I
those were the
remember.
numbers.
That's my memory, but
Right.
I do have the PM about it, so I can pull up the link here.
Oh,
probably,
thank you.
and find that. And I actually have another Texas abortion article that we can follow up with. That's a guy that wants to ban it entirely.
Yeah.
So this is
I think we had that
20-week
conversation
abortion
back in
ban
1973.
fails. Yeah. Yeah,
So,
really. This has been tried.
Just
So a bill that would criminalize abortions after 20 weeks of pregnancy failed to advance Monday in the Senate. Oh, sorry, I've got some sound coming out of my computer. Let me turn that off. Okay. A bill that would criminalize abortions after 20 weeks of pregnancy failed to advance Monday in the Senate. The Pain-Capable Unborn Child Protection Act needed 60 votes to advance in the Senate, but it was blocked by a procedural vote 51 to 46, which I think is relevant because that is a single-digit margin.
Yeah.
Seriously.
Yes.
The bill and the majority was in favor. So this is scary. The bill, which includes exceptions for instances where life is at risk in cases involving rape or incest, was passed by the House of Representatives in October. Similar legislation failed in 2013 and 2015, and yet they keep trying, right?
Yeah.
of course.
Unlike the past two attempts when President Barack Obama was in office, the bill this time had support from Republican President Donald Trump. Similar legislation is already enacted in several states, but opponents of the legislation argue 20-week abortion bans are unconstitutional.
They're unconstitutional, and it doesn't even make sense in terms of the science. This is clearly coming from an emotional place that ignores important issues, and I.
Well, and the other thing is that if you need a late-term abortion, you may not find out that there's something catastrophically wrong with the fetus
Until
you're carrying
20 weeks.
until you get the 20-week ultrasound.
That's when you
At which
find out.
point, you know, it's already too late
Right.
to do anything about it.
Yeah. I mean, at a certain point, you can push it back so far that a person wouldn't even have time to know they were pregnant.
Right.
Right,
And
so-
that's basically what they're
Yeah.
Trying to do.
trying to do.
So they push it back, and then they put delays in place and basically say, but if you go outside this window,
Yeah.
right? But there's a 3-day waiting period, and you have to have 2 visits to the clinic, and then you have to,
Yeah.
you know,
And there's only one clinic.
yeah, in
anywhere
100
near-
miles.
Yeah, et cetera. Yeah, obstacles. It's criminal.
Right. Well, and I think that's one of the reasons the concept of the, you know, a medical abortion or the medication abortion where you just take pills.
Yeah.
You know, I think that's so threatening to a lot of the anti-abortionists because it's done early in the pregnancy and because you're just taking some pills.
Mm-hmm.
don't know.
It's kind of democratizing abortion.
Right, they can't control
you
it.
can't know when someone is having an abortion because she's just taking a pill.
Yeah, and she's doing what she needs to do with her body and
Yeah.
her life.
Yeah. All right.
Right.
So this one, just to say, this is Texas State Representative Tony Tinderholt. He's put up his legislation that is called the Abolition of Abortion in Texas Act, and he just wants to straight up abolish it.
Yeah.
Doesn't
You
want
know,
it to be legal.
I have some advice on how to abolish abortion in Texas. Make birth control free.
It worked in Colorado.
Yeah.
It didn't
Well, I mean,
eliminate it, but
didn't
it
eliminate,
reduces
but
it.
yeah,
Right.
the abortion rate plummets, the
Yeah.
teenage pregnancy rate plummets. You know, women and children do better.
Mm-hmm.
When women and children do better, the entire state does better
Mm-hmm.
economically, socially, politically. Everything, good things happen when you put women in charge of their own reproductive lives.
Right. So, not having access to things, birth control. Why would they have a problem with that necessarily? I know that's The question seems silly, but
No, the problem
You know where
is
I'm
that
going.
when people don't know why they oppose a thing, right? Like, so when you're opposed to something and you don't really know why, a lot of times you look for reasons why. And this is when you start to see reasons that don't make sense.
that's exactly what I'm talking about.
So when you look at it from a perspective of logic, it's, well, if you don't want people to have, if you want to reduce the abortion rate, then you should prevent pregnancies. That would make perfect sense. The reason that they're opposed to the birth control, if you go and look at their opposition to it, they have like this slew of, oh, it's unhealthy, which a lot of unhealthy things are totally legal. They will get into, oh, this is going to promote sexual promiscuity among the kids. This is going to like drive up pregnancy rates. This is going to, and so they come up with all these reasons. But really what's happening, the reason you're going to keep seeing opposition to what seem like common sense solutions is because their real problem is sexuality outside of their particular vision of what sex is and how it should be done. So if you're violating that, they have a problem with you. And they are not going to allow it. And they can't, if they would acknowledge this is like a religious restriction, it applies to me and people that are within my religion, it wouldn't be a problem. The problem is that they are bothered that other people aren't subscribing to their religious, moral dictates or their religious prescriptions. It's not even really morality, it's just rules. So it's like religious prescriptions that they think everyone should have to subscribe to. They don't see it as like a personal religious issue, or they're not capable of understanding that it is. Like this guy, Tinderholt, he explains that, quote, he's a firm believer in, he is, quote, a firm believer that God creates children in his own image, regardless of how that child is brought into the world. It's created in his image, and how can someone want to destroy that?
Wow. So they're looking at it through their own set of blinders about
This is a guy who's putting forward legislation to ban abortion because of his religious view on abortion.
And not just that, but how he views sex should be it should reflect his sexual world.
Right. When you see something
in
outside of that,
marriage.
they're opposed to it, right? They're opposed to homosexuality. They're opposed to transgender. They're opposed to anything that does not fit their model. They are going to oppose it.
And there's another aspect of that. It's also just an ignorance about what people experience. There are married religious people who don't have access to, it's difficult to get access to birth control. So he's assuming that if you're married and a religious, that you're somehow going to have the resources to do, or agree with him anyway, for that matter.
And their view on that is that if you're married, and you should be open to having as many children.
Yeah, you shouldn't need to be on birth control because you're married.
Right.
So everything revolves around this Christian model of sexuality, which has dominated basically our society and our culture for thousands and thousands of years now. And I believe that the damage it has done by inserting itself as a unquestioned reality is horrendously broad.
Yeah.
I think that there's a lot of harm that it does that people aren't even aware of. I just made a small Facebook post the other day, and it was amazing to me how many people posted on it to say, oh my gosh, this rocked my world because I never thought of it this way. And all I was saying was some really basic things about sexuality and marriage and how sexuality long-term in relationships for most folks is not going to maintain. And that when you hit a certain point, when one of the parties decides, I'm not interested in sex anymore, there's really no excuse to trap somebody in a situation where they cannot have sex. And they have to stay married, or they're going to be in the marriage, but they are not allowed to have sex. And it's like weird because you end up in this situation where you're sexually exclusive with somebody who's not having sex with you. And now you're sitting there saying, wait a minute.
Yeah.
This isn't, why am I sexually exclusive with the person who's not wanting to have sex with me? This makes no sense. But there were a lot of people that posted on my wall that were like, I've never thought of that. Never thought of it that way. And it's like, you're trapping yourself by the vision of exclusivity. But we have this model, this social model, where if you step outside of that, you are evil. And most people, because of the pressure to not even suggest that you should be allowed to step outside of that are afraid to even come forward and talk about it with their partner. They won't even come forward and say, look, you're not interested in sex with me anymore. I would like to go out and have sex with other people. Or just, I am going to go out and have sex with other people. I'm not the type of person who cheats and lies, so I'm telling you.
Yeah.
You know, just be assertive and say, I can't do this. You know, you can do this, and that's fine. And I like all the other aspects of this marriage, but not having sex is not an option for me. So I'm going to go have sex. I'm willing to stay married to you. If you want to leave me, that's your right. But I'm not going to go the rest of my life without sex. But there are people who look at that and they're just like, oh, what a monster who would put their spouse in that position. But it's like some of these people, just like what I was talking about on the thread, have been through multiple rounds of going to see a therapist. So these aren't people who are just like, oh, I haven't had sex in 2 weeks and I'm going to do this. It's like these are people who for years have been struggling with this issue and their spouses are not sympathetic. You know, a lot of times the spouses are just like, oh, it's just because we also do that, right? We tell people, well, this is what happens. How many jokes are there about when you get married, you don't have sex anymore? That is a running gag. Get used to it, you know. Join the club. None of us are really having sex anymore. Last time I had sex with my spouse,
Well,
you know.
the joke I heard decades ago from a guy in flight school who just gotten married, people were telling him the joke. That, you know, the first year you're married, every time you have sex, you put a nickel in a jar. And then after the first year, every time you have sex, you take a nickel out of the jar and you never empty the jar.
Right. I mean, it's a joke, and everybody chuckles about it, right? We all get it. We all get the joke because we have a model where it's normal to partner with a person and then stop having sex and never have sex again and then go to the rest of your life either not having sex or cheating on your spouse.
Right.
And you're either unhappy because you're not having sex or you're cheating and you're a monster.
I'm so glad we live in a day and age when divorce is an easy and mostly acceptable thing.
It's legally, I don't know how easy it is. I handled my own divorce, and it was several times more costly than my marriage, even though nobody contested anything. I mean, this was complete, everything was agreed to. Plus, I had to go through months of like waiting and like procedures where I had to file at court and then responses had to, and this is, like I said, with both parties agreeing to the settlement.
Yeah.
You know, and then finally I had to go before a judge and literally get the judge to, sign off on this, talk to me about it, and then I had to go carry it and get, you know, so it's like when I got my marriage license, it was nothing. We went before a judge, that was it.
When I've been married twice. My second and last husband, he's the keeper. The first one, we got married, and I signed my name on the marriage certificate with my new name, and that's all I needed to do.
Yeah.
When I wanted to go back to my real name after I got divorced, oh my God, the paperwork that I had to do.
Yeah.
My passport looked like a book because there was so much stuff that had to be added to it, and all the paperwork, and I had to go to it was a pain in the butt. So I understand.
Nobody
Yes,
needs
it's
a
hard.
lawyer to go get a marriage license.
But it's not like, but it's not like 100 years ago where you just sit.
Yeah, you're allowed to do it,
Right.
but people don't want to do it too. The other thing is there's a huge emotional investment cost because of the way we look at it.
That's true.
And that's the other thing that I think is a social, you know, we look at this as like, oh, this is a reality. And it's like, no, it's not a reality. This is a social construct that these relationships are, that it's like devastating for this relationship to end. That is not the way it has to be. It's the way we treat it. You're supposed to be nasty to each other. You're supposed to make it as hard as possible. You're supposed to fight about custody of your kids. You're supposed to go, you know, just snarling at each other about property. You're not supposed to be friends. You're not supposed to say, hey, you know what? It was a good run, but we're not having sex anymore, and we're kind of just coming and going like roommates. And we've been to a couple counselors, and you know, I want to leave this while we're still friends because I'm starting to resent you for not having sex with me. And it's wrong for me to blame you for not having sex with me, right? And that's the other thing. The partner who's not having sex, what are they supposed to do?
Right.
If I am not inclined to have sex with somebody anymore, if I'm not attracted to them, if I'm not sexually inspired by the person, what am I supposed to do?
Right.
And just like pretend I like it? Or, I mean, geez, what a nightmare that is for somebody to be pressuring you to have sex with them and you're just like, I don't feel it anymore and I don't want to hurt your feelings, but you don't turn me on anymore.
Right.
And so both parties are tortured in this mess over the presumption of sexual exclusivity as this must be. And it's just like, no, there's options. It's just that our society doesn't even, and like for the people on my Facebook wall, it was just like, this is such a simple solution, and I didn't ever think about it. Like, I just thought, I'm trapped. And I thought that for the longest time, right? I thought, what do I do in this situation? I kept floating like, hey, if you'd like to go outside the marriage, I'm okay with that. Just so long as we're both aware and everybody knows what's going on. And I couldn't get a conversation going. And it just finally reached a point where I had to come forward and say, I'm not dead yet, and I'm not ready to give up sex, and I can't speak for you, but I'm going out to find romance, and I'm not inclined to leave you or destroy the marriage over it. But if that's what you need to do, you have that right, and I'm not going to lie, I'm not going to cheat, keep you informed, handle it how you want to handle it, respond how you need to respond. It's just, I'm giving you an FYI. And I just think that people are afraid to have that conversation because they're afraid, oh, what if they say they're leaving me? And I thought, hey, what if my spouse had said I'm leaving you? And frankly, he didn't, right? It wasn't until later that we got divorced. But it's like, at some point, you just have to go to the person, be honest, say, here's what's going on. This isn't working for me. I need another solution. And if we go to counselors, if we have conversations, we can't find the solution. I need to go somewhere else and get this, just like if there was no food in the house and there was not going to be any shopping, there wasn't going to be any cooking, and I would decide to go have dinner somewhere else, you can't really fault me for that. So at a certain point, people just need to really see to their own needs, but I don't advocate doing it dishonestly.
That's the thing.
But at the same time, I think about, for example, the stigma that was put on homosexuality for how long, right? And so you had all these gay people that were getting married. And, of course they were lying. Of course they were not honest and out, right? But we look at that with compassion and we say, well, our society puts so much pressure on people to not be gay and for everybody to be straight that nobody could be out and open and gay. And we are not at a point where we accept the polyamorous perspective at the rates that polling shows it should be probably practiced.
Yeah.
Right? So the number of people who express that they would want more than one partner or that they would want sex outside their current relationship in addition to keeping the relationship does not correspond to the number of people who identify as polyamorous. Not by a long shot.
There's you've probably read it. There's actually a book out called Sex at Dawn that explores sort of the I guess evolutionary basis for polyamory in humans. And it points out the fact that we are as closely related to bonobos as we are to chimpanzees. And bonobos,
right.
They settle conflict by having sex. I mean, that's how they celebrate things, by having sex. Everything, revolves around some kind of sexual expression.
And that's another thing that people buy into without question is this, they'll throw down the concept sex is for procreation. And it's like, you know what, when you observe human beings and when you observe other species, there are some species, including human beings, where it appears to be for social purposes primarily.
Yeah.
And we're actually not good at reproduction when you compare us to other species.
Yeah.
We're poor reproducers, despite the fact of our population numbers.
Yeah.
I think it was something like a study where they did human beings trying to have a child. So these were couples who were trying to have a child. The average number of sex acts required for a pregnancy was 104.
Holy cow.
And I think with apes, like gorillas, it's something like 12. We are not very good at reproducing. We're very bad at it. And sex for us, we have all kinds of things like the hidden estrus, right? Women, you don't know when a woman is really fertile. It takes all kinds of stuff to figure that out if you want to do. And so there's all these things to show that women are in humans are built to have sex, or I guess sexuality is something that we can do anytime, and we can. I'm catching myself here. I had to catch myself because I actually said women are built for this, and I thought up to myself, what a slight toward trans women.
Yeah.
What I just said, right? But and then I had to stop and think, like, how should I express that? That's a question.
Yeah.
I'm asking.
I don't know. I think that
I recognized the problem with what I expressed, but I didn't know how to re-express it.
Yeah. I don't know.
Cis women or cis women? Maybe, I don't, whatever the term, but the presumption, when you look at the what we consider to be the biological, map that you see of the female body, there is not like a time when they
Right.
when they can have sex. Like there's a lot of other species, they're only open to sexuality at
there's-
certain times.
There's a lot of theories about, the hidden estrus was basically to keep a male partner around because human infants have such a long development period, and you need another partner around helping provide for, the infant. But, historically, humans traveled in hunter-gatherer groups, and, I guess the anthropological evidence suggests that the entire group was invested in the children, and that, not having the actual biological father of that child available to help wasn't really a big deal, because you had other women, you had, the other men in the group,
Yeah.
and it wasn't like it was only the biological father of the child providing for that child.
Yeah, and we talked a little bit even before we relaunched this about different cultures who have different models of
paternity,
what is considered paternity.
Yeah.
And the idea that we have as a culture, like we think of that in terms of this is just how it is, and it's like no, this is how culturally we look at this.
Right.
There are other models of paternity in other societies where they don't look at it that way, where the fathers don't even aren't required to have any responsibility for the children that they father, that it's up to the mother's family owns the child, like, from a legal perspective.
Yeah.
And it's her brothers and things that are going to be like the male models for this kid. The partible paternity cultures where every guy who's having sex with her is a partial father.
Yeah.
And has paternal, duties for the child. It's broad. So
Well, the system as we have it that you were outlining, it goes back far enough that I don't think we can draw a lot from it biologically and in terms of behavior. I think you have to be very careful when you say that X behavior relates to such and such evolutionarily, or humans, the hidden reproductive system and all that, or the hidden estrus thing and all that.
Yeah, I know.
There's, yeah.
A lot of that comes across as kind of a bunch of just so stories.
It is, a lot of it. You have to be very
Sociobiologists
careful
came up with, or now evolutionary psychologists came up with to.
right, but I
kind of
mean,
bootstrap an
like I said, you can look at
explanation on-
polling where 3/4 of men and women are basically saying, "I would like to have more than one partner,
Right.
but I know I'm not allowed."
I think it's
Yeah.
pretty clear that we're not a monogamous species.
Yeah, but it's also clear that we're sexual
Right,
and
very much
we're
so.
not very good at reproducing compared to other species. I mean, the models that we have a lot in common with species that are socially sexual, and there's not much to support an idea that it is just a given that reproduction is the primary purpose of human sexuality. And I think it seems to be not a given because people are driven
Right.
with sex, and there's a lot more going on there than
Right.
just
Most of the sex
reproduction.
we have is non-reproductive sex. And that's true whether you're gay or straight or whatever. People are having sex
yeah.
because it's fun.
Well, masturbation, for crying out loud in a bucket.
Yeah.
I mean, nothing to do with anything but feeling good.
Right.
And there's a drive to do it. You can't.
But I do think it's a fair point to say that any or all of this does not have to be biologically justified.
Exactly.
That a person's choices in regard to their own sexual destiny are their own, and not and whether it would align with any kind of physical reality or not is irrelevant.
Back on the Just So stories, one of the worst offenders, in my opinion, is Desmond Morris. If you've read any of his books, he's written books on cat behavior and dog behavior, I think, and human behavior.
Yep.
And just reading through the book on human behavior, I just cringe. And then I see people cite what he says.
Yeah.
And I just cringe. Please, if you are a fan of Desmond Morris, rethink your fandom. He really does not know what he's talking about. The cleavage resembling the buttocks thing, I was like, oh,
Yeah.
for crying out loud. What in
Yeah.
the world? by that sort of logic, any fold, like the fold between my toes, should turn men on. What the heck? That's just ridiculous. It goes on with that sort of stuff. And the pubic hair thing, I mean, it's clear in animals across the board, everything from butterflies to humans, that hair that's in a bizarre place that serves no other purpose is to disperse odor.
So I have a stinky head? Like if I, like, what does that mean?
Your armpits,
Like eyebrows?
and the eyebrows are for signaling, probably. I mean, that's a guess there. But the ones that are really bizarre, the hair on top of your head,
Okay.
serves. It's probably a protective thing. But
That makes
pubic
sense.
hair and armpit hair disperse odor,
And there's stinky positions for hair. After
and it advertises. I mean, in a normal reproductive organism, we wouldn't be washing all the time, and so it would be very clear if we were in a group whether you had mated recently, whether you were more in the mood or not, that sort of thing. And when you hit puberty,
Yeah.
everybody will know when you're of reproductive age. Goodness knows if you have a teenage person in your house, you know when they have started to hit reproductive age.
I'm about to have a teenage person in my house.
I have, I have one.
Yes. Yes.
And showers are important.
Yeah, we had that conversation with him. He walked by one day. I'm like, dude, you stink.
Yeah,
You need to be using deodorant here. Let
Right.
me take care of that for you.
Right? It's hard to be around junior high because if you ever go into a junior high classroom, they're at that age where they're just kind of hitting it, and they don't know that they smell, and they don't know that it's not really cool.
Well, what's
It
cool is
smells-
my son is kind of a rule kitten. So if once I told him,
nice.
here's your deodorant, use this every day," he's like, okay, that's a rule. I got to use that every day. So he does.
Right on.
So yeah.
Yeah.
So anyway, so I guess we are running long here. So
What time is it?
It is 12:22.
Okay, shall we? We had another good news thing, the Black History Month thing.
Yes, it is
Jen?
Black History Month, and I wanted to highlight a feminist, activist, atheist woman who's also a strong Black woman. And actually, she died several years ago, but this is Florence Flo Kennedy. She was quite a character. As I said, she was a lawyer, a feminist, activist, and atheist. When she first applied for admission to Columbia University's law school, her application was rejected. So she went to meet with the dean of the law school, and he informed her that, oh, no, we didn't reject you because you're Black. We rejected you because you're a woman. And she's like, well, I don't care, because either way, it feels the same to me, so I'm still going to sue you. And so he said, okay, yeah, we're going to let you in. And so she got into law school, graduated. And again, she was a great activist for a lot of different social justice causes. I believe this is a quote from her autobiography, because intersectionality was a big deal for her. And this quote is, "My main message is that we have a pathologically, institutionally racist, sexist, classist society, and that niggerizing techniques that are used don't only damage Black people, but they also damage women, gay people, ex-prison inmates, prostitutes, children, old people, handicapped people, Native Americans. And that if we can begin to analyze the pathology of oppression, we would learn a lot about how to deal with it." So that was her quote.
Oh man, that's beautiful.
And she was also really good with slogans, and she was an opponent of military and interventionist wars, especially the Vietnam War. And she coined the term Pentagonorrhea to describe this.
Oh my God.
So, Flo Kennedy.
Right on. And on that humorous note, we have another segment that is at this point called Bless Their Heart, where we talk about someone who's just kind of not quite cutting it. And in this one, this isn't really a feminist thing, but it is a skeptic thing. And I just had to do it because I thought it was so hilarious when I found it. So today is the day that the flat earther, what's his name, Mike Hughes, is going to launch himself into space with a steam-powered rocket.
Awesome.
Yes, Jen, you can probably speak to whether that's going to work or not. And go up there and look around and see if he can see if the Earth is actually flat or like a frisbee or whatever. And I'm not sure how he thinks that's going to work. Anyhow. But he says, to raise the money, Hughes was going to launch himself a mile across the Mojave Desert back in November in a steam-powered rocket with Research Flat Earth on the side as a fundraising stunt. Call it phase 1 of his one-man space program.
It's actually kind of cute.
I know.
It is, like you said, it's the bless your heart segment, right?
It's really funny.
It's a good,
He says, this is what happens anytime we have to deal with any kind of government agency. He's apparently dealing with lots of red tape, if you can imagine. He tried to get the paper. Some mocked him for believing in a flat earth. Some suggested he'd only adopted the philosophy to raise funds for his stunts. And a few even accused him of faking his previous rocket flight several years ago. The flat earth stuff, it makes people crazy, Hughes told the Washington Post. No matter what I do, people are going to minimize it. Aw.
Yeah.
I would sit on my porch with beer
Just
watch this guy. Like if he was my neighbor,
Mm-hmm.
I'd just be like, cute. What's his name?
Mike Hughes.
You do it, Mike.
Yeah, you go, Mike.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, my gosh. People are calling me not a flat earther. They're calling into question that he's a true believer.
Questioning his beliefs.
Do I believe? Yeah, right. Do I believe the Earth is shaped like a frisbee or flat or whatever? I do, because in my months of research, I've not been able to prove otherwise. Can you believe this? Oh God.
Well, at least he's trying to
That's
falsify
how you do it right.
right?
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so here's some of his proof. Forget space, Hughes said. He's also come to doubt what lies underneath the planet's surface. We've only drilled 7.5
right.
miles into the Earth.
So he's
he
got a
said.
shovel now, right?
Right.
He's
So
ready.
all that crap we were taught in school about the mantle is all bullshit. No one knows. Right?
Yeah.
There's no such thing as volcanoes and volcanology
Right.
and all that stuff. That's just bullshit. Here we go.
Yeah, when you see lava coming up from the ocean floor, it's kind of tells you something,
Yeah,
right?
plate tectonics, that's all
Yeah.
hogwash too. Oh my God. Anyway, that's a ways he needs. Where'd it go? He's an independent thinker.
Yeah.
Yeah, and said if he makes it into space and sees a curved horizon, he'll accept that the Earth is round.
You don't even have to go to space to see a curved horizon.
What if it's just curved?
Right.
What if it's a curved frisbee?
Right?
It's a contact lens.
It's like a hubcap.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, right?
Concave,
Yes.
convex, whatever that is. Yeah,
He
yeah.
just needs to see for himself. All righty. Anyway, that's a ways off. First, Hughes needs to avoid another delay and launch next week on private property outside Amboy with flat Earth emblazoned on the side of his new rocket so as to convince people to donate hundreds of thousands of dollars to build the balloon and buy the spacesuit for phase 2. He's going to... Okay. In his video, Hughes also addresses critics who accuse him of faking his most famous stunt because video of the stunt never shows him inside the thing. His cameraman had to stop filming to help him with the canopy.
Now, here's a question. Does anybody know if this is tied to religious beliefs, or is this just purely like a science denial thing?
I've heard that there is...
Because he's not talking about God at all.
Right, that's true.
He's
There's
just-
stuff in the Bible that would seem to support that you should think it's flat if you are a 100%.
But if he's just like, I have to see it for myself, I'm like, okay, so are you like an atheist flat earther then?
It's not clear. Maybe
I mean, he's certainly not quoting scriptures and things.
Nope.
It's interesting. It's just like, is this a Bigfoot style thing, or is this a religious? I mean, there probably are some religious folks in it. I imagine.
Oh, yeah.
I just wonder if there are some that are just like, no, we're atheists, but this is
We don't believe
science.
it. Yeah, same sort of person who denies the moon
Yeah.
landing and that sort of stuff.
Aliens seeded us. It's not evolution,
Right.
Yeah. there's that.
And Tracie, I'm sorry, you won't be able to sit on your front porch because it says right here, while he won't allow live spectators at next Saturday's launch, which is today.
Yeah, heart officially broken here.
Yeah, aw.
Yeah.
And he promised to shoot down any drones. So don't send out your drones.
Oh,
right?
okay.
Unless
Okay.
you want to see a drone shot down from a guy in a rocket balloon or whatever that is.
He's going to be kind of busy. Is he going to have like a sniper there
Get
with him
yourself
too?
a cheap drone and let's make it a show.
He said in the video it would be live streamed. So I don't know if it's out there somewhere, but
We need to tune in
Yeah.
and find out.
we'll see what happens. I'm going to paraphrase here today. To paraphrase John F. Kennedy at the dawn of the moon missions, no one said this would be easy.
Well, all right.
It's
So-
good to have goals.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
I kind of wish more people had just sort of like these, if you're going to believe stuff, why not just believe wacky stuff that impacts you, right? It's
Yeah.
just like,
Oh my God.
there you go.
Oh.
At least he's not out there passing legislation, right?
Right? Oh my gosh.
Exactly. All right.
right.
So I've got. We're done with that. We got one
Yeah.
more.
Yeah.
Okay.
You ready?
So yeah. So it has become kind of every time somebody talks about how difficult it is to be in the closet or make some comment about an anti-gay politician or something like that, it's become kind of fashionable for. It's almost always a cishet, dude who pops in to proclaim that this virulently anti-gay politician or celebrity or whatever is secretly gay himself. And that, we're just waiting for the other shoe to drop, waiting for the scandal where he gets caught in the
He thinks
bathroom with
he
another man.
Doth protest too much, sort of stuff.
Yeah, and it's almost like, hey, Jesus is coming soon. It's like, okay, how long do we have to wait for this other shoe to drop here, But there's a bigger issue with this, and I've started coming at people pretty hard on this because this kind of talk is on par with, someone having a discussion of crime rates and people saying, oh, but what about black on black crime? And you never hear black people talking about black on black crime. It's always some very concerned white allies, and I use that in quotes there, who are so concerned about black on black crime, and everybody else rolls their eyes. This is something similar to that because these are not people who are involved in the gay community. They're not gay. They don't know shit about this. But they assure us, me in particular, that they have many gay friends who've validated this claim.
Oh, God.
And that it's, and then they point to scandals like, Larry Craig getting caught in a men's room with his toe tapping, and what was it?
Ted Haggard.
Ted Haggard,
Who is
and-
completely heterosexual.
Yeah, George Reekers, who was, he had a rent boy lifting his luggage for him on a
Right.
trip and all this, and it's like, okay, there's no question that there are, closet
Right.
cases among, the virulently anti-gay people.
Right.
There's lots of people in the closet, okay? Being gay is not a choice. Being in the closet is a choice, and sometimes it's the most rational choice you can make depending on your circumstances. Being anti-gay is also a choice, and that's a choice people make whether they're gay or straight.
Yeah.
And if you're a gay person in the closet and you choose to act on this, based on this anti-gay message, that's a choice that I will rightfully condemn because you are harming people who've done you no harm at all. You're harming your own people. But the reality is most people in the closet never harm another gay person. They're in the closet for their own reasons. Whether those are reasonable or not is not for me to say. And I'm very opposed to outing people who have made a rational choice to stay in the closet unless they're actively harming gay people. And then I'm in favor of outing them, not because they're gay, but because of the hypocrisy. So I make a distinction between being a hypocrite and, just being in the closet because you're afraid.
Right.
But I wanted to, there's a woman who, Lindsay King Miller, who wrote an article for Roll Reboot, and I want to read a section of what she wrote here because I think it's really kind of informative here. It says, but more importantly, when we call homophobic politicians closet cases, we shift the blame for the marginalization of LGBTQ people. We shift the blame that LGBTQ people still face onto ourselves. The claim that self-hating gay people are keeping the community down is on a level with the idea that if women were just more confident at work, the wage gap would disappear overnight. Internalized homophobia is a symptom of an oppressive culture, not the cause of oppression. If every closeted LGBTQ person in the world came out tomorrow, guess what? Homophobia would still exist. The closet case rhetoric turns any discussion of LGBTQ rights into a game of why are you hitting yourself? And so this is one of the reasons I object to this so much. It's basically blaming closeted gay people for our own oppression. And I mean, I've been out of the closet forever. But I can remember a time, especially when I was in the military, when you had to be in the closet.
Yeah.
It was the only way you could continue to serve. And I mean, so I was closeted by necessity, and I would never have done anything to harm another gay person. You know?
Anytime a person lies or hides, my first question is, were they able to be open and tell the truth? Right? So if somebody lies or hides something from me, the first thing I should be thinking is, did I make a welcoming environment for them to come to me and be honest and open about what it is they wanted to tell me? Or did I make them believe, did I do anything to make them believe that I would react more hostily or negatively up to this, to the point that they felt like they couldn't talk to me about it? Right? Because we see that with the sexuality thing again in parents, right? So the kids having sex and they're just like, you know, so what's going on? Is something going on? No, nothing's going on. And then they catch the kid with their partner in the bedroom, whatever. And then they're just like, well, I can't believe you lied to me.
Yeah.
And it's like, when you came up and like started threateningly asking me if I was having sex, I kind of thought saying, it was not a good idea. Right?
Yeah.
And this is kind of what you're describing. You're basically saying that whether the person understands at a conscious level that there's, you know, that they actually are hiding, or whether they are suppressing it because somebody has taught them that, these gay feelings you're having, they're just a temptation, but you're really straight and it's fine. It's just, you know, you have to fight this evil stuff. Yeah, and so they could be literally walking around thinking I'm a straight person that struggles with these same-sex things like a lot of people do. And
they assume everybody
that's
does.
what to them that's what gay is, right?
Yeah.
And so, that's what straight is. And people identify and label in a lot of interesting ways, and we can get into that another day, but it's like a lot of people that use the straight label will acknowledge same-sex attraction. It's just not predominant for them. So they're just like, basically, I'm straight. And so what people label themselves as is one thing, but what you're talking about is somebody that's either hiding on purpose because they feel like it's unsafe to not hide, or somebody who is suppressing and unaware because they've been made to believe that this was not okay and it's not safe to admit what's really going on. And I think blaming, like you said, blaming the person for, or bringing the idea that they are gay into it is sort of secondary to the fact that somebody's doing harm.
Right.
So the person who is anti-gay, like openly anti-gay to the point that they would be pushing for legislation, wanting to deny rights, you know, or even just slandering and, you know, slurring, those people are damaging whether they're gay or not.
Right. And the overwhelming majority of them are not gay.
Exactly.
You know?
Yeah.
They have no idea that, you know, for them they have never asked themselves, at what point did I choose to be straight? You know, because they never did, and they just don't understand how anyone could be this way.
Yeah.
You know? And so to basically take this tiny subset of people who are very anti-gay and gay and closeted and act like this is like a huge segment of the anti-gay people out there, that's just ridiculous. It is absolutely absurd. It is just a minuscule number of people, in spite of the fact that you get a lot of press from it. And there's also some studies that were done that kind of for a while at least, bolstered the idea that people who had the most homophobic attitudes were more likely to have same-sex attractions. And so most of these studies involved college-aged men, because we all know that college-aged men are entirely representative of everyone else in the population, right?
Oh, my God.
And they showed them different images of, sexuality and like mundane things, and they measured basically whether they got an erection or not
Really?
from this.
Oh, Lordy.
Well, the problem with that is what they're measuring is not actually necessarily sexual attraction. They're measuring arousal. And that's a very different thing, because if they're very anti-gay and they see an image of two men having sex, that will create this arousal response, which may include blood flowing into their penis. It doesn't mean they're sexually attracted. It's just some stuff that ask any dude who's been in combat. There's a large percentage.
You're looking at me like I should know this.
So
I have no idea about the penises of men in combat and how they react.
there's a not
Same.
insignificant number of men who will get an erection. It doesn't mean that they're ready to have sex. It's an arousal thing. It happens, and it's the same thing that happens to a lot of sexual assault victims.
Right.
It is well documented in the literature that people who experience sexual assault sometimes have an orgasm in the course of the assault. It does not mean they weren't raped. It means their body responded.
Yep.
Yeah.
As a kind of an automatic thing. And so you can't take these studies that purport to show that anti-gay people or homophobic people harbor same-sex attractions and take that as at face value. Because there are some deep flaws in that, and they don't really account for some of these other responses.
Right.
But anyway, that's my little rant, because on Beth Presswood's wall, another cishet dude showed up to lecture me on why.
Super.
So this would be like in line with that comment about special place in hell for women who don't support other women.
Yeah.
Right? Because women who don't support other women generally are also victims of a culture that has taught them that women shouldn't have equality,
Right.
women shouldn't have, bodily autonomy that, I mean, they're responding to that same social
Right.
pressure.
Right. And in terms of, closeted, LGBTQ people who are actively harming other LGBTQ people, no sympathy. My sympathy for them ends when they start doing actual harm to other people.
All right. Well, we are over time by a fair amount.
Yeah.
It's been wonderful. So,
Yes, huge thanks to our production crew who's hanging in there. They haven't even been pestering us to wrap it up.
yeah. Yay, guys.
And-
Thanks so much.
And Vern brought donuts. So
That's,
Yeah.
so
very nice.
Thanks, Vern.
Awesome. Thank you, everybody. All righty. So, with that, I'm going to leave you with this thought. We don't need a savior. We have each other. It's all we've ever had and all we'll ever need.
Amen.
All right. Thank you.